afternoon, Jes. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much. A bit wet and windy, but it's all good here.
It is very wet and windy where I am. Whereabouts in the country are you?
I'm in South Gloucestershire, so just about 15 miles north of Bristol, but in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And have you lived there long? Is that where you've originated from?
I'm actually a Shropshire lad of origin, and after that I went to until I was sort of 20, well, a bit younger. Went to Swansea University, did energy engineering, which was a bit unusual at the time, and then I moved to Nottingham to live, where I had my first job with an EnCO, and then moved with the same company down to the southwest, which is where I've been ever since.
Right.
And we've been living where we are now for the last 20 years, this month, actually.
Right, 20 years. I did think that your accent wasn't from the Gloucester area. I'm sure I felt it was a bit northern, more up north, north, I should say. So, Jes, thank you for joining us today, and we're going to be talking about EnCO and your background regarding that and what you've been doing there, delivering that training. But for the benefit of our audience, can you give us some background to your origin and where you've come from within the industry?
So, yes, I started in the energy industry with my degree at Swansea Uni. Unusual at the time in terms of energy engineering. I think that at the time there was only Leeds and perhaps Napier in Edinburgh that did anything to do with energy. That was all. And my background was very much as a geologist, very interested in rocks and that sort of thing. That's where my sort of initial spark came. And I spent then 16 years with an EnCO, in terms of an energy services company, in all sorts of different levels, starting in project management, energy surveys that were fairly unusual in that context at the time. And
sorry to ask this.
Yeah,
sorry to ask this, Jes, but how far back are we talking? What year are we talking? Because
well,
you know, energy
yes.
management isn't that modern, is it?
No, that's right. So yeah, very good question. So I think I can put it in a nutshell fairly easily that I've been a member of the Energy Institute just about now for 40 years. So this was the early 1980s,
right.
when I went to, well, it was 79, I think, when I went to university. So yes, a good deal of time ago, and obviously a lot has changed in the industry over that time. So it is quite interesting. So after I then set up in 1999, 23 years ago almost, set up my own company, which was initially just me, and concentrated in a number of different areas, not just energy, but also in helping organizations to outsource their core services, which is kind of EnCO turned the other way around. You know, giving intelligence to the customer side of an EnCO type arrangement and helping them through. So that was a sort of another interesting area, and the company's slowly grown over the time. There's now 24 of us.
Wow.
Pretty big turnover, and we're set up very much like a large company. So we've got we have ourselves. We've had since 2003 ISO 9001, which is also fairly unusual. We also have ISO 50001, and 3 weeks ago we were actually certified as a B Corp, which I'm very proud of.
What does B Corp stand for?
So B Corp is short for B Corporation, and it is a measure of your social, ethical, and environmental stance and operation as a company.
Right.
So, for instance, in our articles of associations of the company, we actually have written into it that we operate to the triple bottom line.
Right. Brilliant.
So it's fairly unusual. So we're quite passionate about what we do. And it's definitely not about the money. It's about doing the right thing.
Exactly. And what are the services the organization provides?
So I would split that into sort of three core areas. One is what I kind of referred to at the beginning in terms of facility and asset management, and helping organizations through the sort of outsourcing or indeed the insourcing process. It's not about outsourcing, it's about doing things effectively. Another is energy, which is probably historically has been our biggest part of the company's turnover. And it's everything to do with energy, from strategy and policy and advice through to identifying projects and implementing, both in terms of technology and behavior change. And then the third area, which has been a huge growth area over the last 3 years, we started into it very early. It is really everything to do with net zero and the environment. So we've got lots of environmental skills that sort of push the boundary now way beyond just energy.
Okay, and any examples of what you're doing regarding net zero?
Most of the net zero work right now is strategic work. So measuring and being sure in terms of the footprint, which isn't as straightforward as many people think. But it's also then about coming up with obviously targets, action plans, objectives, having a charter or a sort of initial outline of exactly what an organization is going to do prior to setting any targets, which is not always the case, believe it or not. Yeah. And then progressively helping through an implementation journey across the whole of scope 3, particularly, and I know scope 3 is everybody else's scope 1 and 2 in your supply chain, but there are some significant things that can be changed and improved there. And we've already started on that road with a number of customers, and it's a sort of rapidly growing area as people at long last actually need to help to try and save this planet.
And there's more awareness now around it, isn't there? No.
Yes, indeed.
I'm going to take you back in time, because I've been in the industry similar time to yourself. And when I go back to my early days, energy management wasn't what it was today. There was no legislation around. There was no drivers. The only drivers really then was money, wasn't it? You know, by leaving lights on or leaving power on or machinery on, it was costing us money. And it's all recovering that. But nowadays, the whole ball game has changed now. And I've seen that changed. And I'm going to ask you the question with what you think the drivers have been. But I've seen the drivers change throughout my career, basically.
I often describe to people, and probably I would use a period of 30 years or 25 years, and I point to this red mark on my forehead of where I've been banging my hand against the wall for all of this time, because it's never really, for me, been about money, albeit that most frequently energy efficiency projects have a superb payback. But it's nothing to do with that. And I think people are suddenly starting to twig on that, do we want to live on this planet? And, you know, I've never been a greenie. I've been a bit of a weirdo because I've got a degree in energy engineering 40 years ago. But yeah, I'm definitely not a greenie, but I would rather like the planet to be around for my children and grandchildren and their grandchildren in the years to come, in a way that conserves all resources, not just energy, all resources, and where clean air, water, and land is sacrosanct. And we've been going down a tube very rapidly, and someone's at high level now realized this, or some people, and we're trying to now get the tube to go back upwards, and it's not that easy, but we at long last realize we need to do something.
It wasn't until 2006 that someone actually called me a tree hugger. while I was doing an energy audit, because I was asking him to turn the plant room lights off as we was leaving the plant rooms. That humoured me, and it has till this day. You know, I always think back at that time. You know, I've told people to turn many a light off in the plant rooms as we walked out of them, but that particular time, I remember it vividly because he called me a tree hugger, and I'm thinking, interesting.
Yeah, that obviously says more about them than it does about you.
Yeah.
But yes, it's interesting. Yeah, I haven't really been called that, probably because I get it in first that I'm not. I just trying to do what's right.
Maybe that's what I should have said. I'm not a tree hugger. Well, do you know what? I do find myself saying that now, but yes. So I met you probably last year when we was kicking off the EnCO training, which was been very sort of eye-opening for myself, and it been underlining all the stuff I do regarding, I call it best practice with organizations. So where did that all come from, with you and John and Esther, etc.? Where did that all start?
Yes, that's a good question. So until about 2 years ago, I was chair for almost 5 years of the Independent Energy Consultants Group within Esther, which is one of the 4 Esther groups. And about only a few months into my acting as chair, I actually tabled what I thought was a unique and rather interesting project that I did at a global power systems manufacturer some years earlier, where I was actually flabbergasted by the level of savings that actually had been achieved and proven. And I can come back to that later, because my history before that was all technology. You know, I'm an engineer where technology has been at heart for all of the 30 odd years prior to that. And I was astounded that, you know, we were able to measure almost 10% savings that we could absolutely prove came from people and not from anything else. And whilst I've always thought in, you know, prior to then that people make an impact, I never realized just how big an impact what you might term the very basic things actually are. So just going back to the story, so I tabled this of what happened, and I remember James Britton was there, and he said, "Oh, actually, I've done something very similar at Heathrow, and yeah, the savings were about the same." And then he said, "Yeah, but and we've only scratched the surface actually in identifying these savings." And I said, "Well, actually, in my example, we've only scratched the surface. We've only done about 30% of the interventions that you could have done, and yet the savings are very clearly measurable." And then I don't remember who, but someone else chipped in and said, yeah, I've got an example. And we all realized that we thought we were the only people in the world that had thought this. And the result of it was just a few months later, we set up a separate group, a sort of behavior change group, to actually try to start an initiative to really get behavior change to become more mainstream, knowing that it would be a very slow job to actually get there. So we set up this group. It eventually became called Energy Conscious Organization, so EnCO for short. And along the journey, we actually approached the Energy Institute to see if they would be prepared to make it a sort of joint initiative, because we thought that their backing, and they had shown interest, we know, through behavior change a couple of years early. They tried something very similar, but it didn't quite take off. And we thought we've got the sort of passion and on the ground experience to make it effective. And so we gradually pulled together a business plan, a vision, mission, tools, various things, pulled together case studies, put a website together, which we hope is where we're all, you know, if there's one place people can go to for behavior change case studies, it's all in one place, because at some point, which I no doubt you'll come back to, no doubt you've got to persuade the board. You have to persuade people to do things. So there's nothing better than examples. to do that. And we quickly realized, as part of our business case, that if we were to achieve our objectives of trying to make behavior change more mainstream, then there were not enough practitioners, whether they were in-house or external, to actually help organizations to implement behavior change programs. Hence the starting of the training 18 months ago, and we're now in the midst of our 14th training course over that period. Yeah, it's all starting to, it's a bit like the net zero suddenly changing the shape of how people are approaching energy. I think we're on behavior change starting to get close to people realizing, well, maybe there is something in this, instead of the skepticism that seems to be behind it.
I worked with an organization in 2005, and we learned that people were the best way of doing this because the board wasn't prepared to invest any money in technology. So they brought me on board to make the savings on energy management, but they weren't prepared to take on board my recommendations of changing the lighting, putting more CHP in, or whatever the technologies were. So we was forced to actually drive energy down, and we was driving energy down 7% year on year. And that's where I started to think there's more to this, as you say. And if I was sitting around at the table with you guys, I would have said, yeah, I've got an example of that as well.
Yes, yeah. So you know, there's really good energy professionals out there that have got this experience, and the trick with the whole thing is actually making it last, of course.
Yeah.
Because unless you have momentum built into a behavior change program, it's liable to slip. Little bit like, although I wouldn't want the analogy to be complete, a little bit like if you don't maintain your compressed air system, you can mend all the leaks, but actually there'll be some more leaks in another month's time. It's the sort of thing that you need to keep on top of. So you can't just, it's not like putting a light in. I know you know this, but it's not like putting a light in that's saving 40% and then that's it, you can leave it. You actually need to work at it, which is perhaps one of the detractions from organizations naturally doing this, because it doesn't seem easy, but actually it is, and the paybacks are incredibly low.
I liken it to spinning plates. So I've got one plate spinning away, I'll go on to the next one, and you know, especially when you're looking at multi-sites, you go on to the next site and that one's working nicely, you go on to the following one, but then if you was to look back at that first site, they're starting to spiral back out of control again. So you have got to keep on top of it and keep focus on it.
And systems, putting systems in place can really make the difference.
And software does come in hand, you know, where we can remotely monitor and then go back into those buildings and looking at their energy globally regarding, you know, the gas and electricity consumptions on a daily basis, maybe.
Yeah, and so, you know, data is an important side, but you know, so are other related systems such as project tracking tools and knowing what savings are actually being achieved through measuring specifically, or by having ISO 50001 energy management system in place is a great structure, as you know.
You alluded to one of my directions of questioning regarding the board. How do we get the board engaged to this? Because we are likely to understand it at ground level, but when we go into the board, how do we get them on board as such?
Yeah, and it's probably, it's interesting because it's probably the most important thing. And the other aspect is when it comes to actually implementing behavior change, you need someone from the board, or at least certainly high up in the company, to actually show an interest and take part. And then just to finish that, because actually it's a three-part thing, is that when it comes to doing a behavior change program, the easiest role within an organization is whoever the sponsor is on the board. They don't actually have to do very much apart from show interest and commitment, and be enthusiastic about the program that others will be implementing. So, but I recognize I haven't directly answered your question because it's a very difficult one to answer. But ultimately, it's a case of showing what other people have done, I believe. The problem with this, it takes time to actually do that. We've got some great case studies. We've got 14 case studies written up on the website. The savings are in the range of 10 to 25%, and in all of these cases, perhaps only 30% of the interventions on behavior change have actually been implemented. But so I think it's only through example. I do believe that government support is essential to accelerate it. We'll get there. We'll just get there too slowly. We've set a target within Energy Conscious Organization, which we think is more than achievable if it was given momentum itself. 10% savings at 2030. It's a huge element of how to get to net zero, and the difficulty is not just with the boards, but with other collaborators, if you like governments, to actually make people realize this instead of just going down the technology option, and also enabling people to realize that when we talk about behavior change, we are talking about technology, because it's people interventions relating to the technology and optimizing it.
Yeah.
I think the Committee of Climate Change, if you looked at the 2019 report, spoke about behavior change only in initiatives saving 9%, technology only saving about 33%, and the remainder, so over 50%, was a combination of behavior change around technology. So we believe that technology is actually about only 50% of the energy efficiency solution, and must be clear, we're talking here about reducing demand. So I'm not sure that directly answers your question. I think if I could easily answer your question, how could you get influence?
There isn't a black and white answer, is there? How to go and do that?
I think we all as practitioners need to continually try to get up to the board. And one of the things that's advantageous now is that the board are listening to net zero like they didn't listen to energy.
Yeah.
Not always the case. I'm not trying to put everyone in the same bucket, because I know some great organizations we work with that really have focused well on energy. But yes, there's a much higher board level involvement now, and they need really to understand that the behavior change element is a core cog of the overall solution, and it gets them there quicker and cheaper.
So the contribution of the 10% savings that you're forecasting, or your targets within EnCO, that's a great target, something for us to head for. Do you know how many practitioners we need to deliver that 10%?
Thousands, tens of thousands, right. Tens of thousands. Yeah, we've set our initial goal within EnCO, sort of by 2023, 24, so we're getting closer to that, is we would like to have 50, we said 50 to 100, but we'd like to have 50 proven case studies.
Right.
And we think that with that momentum of having that many, people can no longer deny that this is an obviously fantastic thing to do. And just to get to 50, we really need to probably have 300 or 400 registered EnCO consultants, and probably 50 or so higher level having proven that they've done it, approved EnCO practitioners.
And this isn't just a UK-based training network that you're developing. You are going to take this globally, aren't you? And you have done.
Yes.
I think you've interviewed some people from, not interviewed, you've trained people from Africa, haven't you?
Yes. So it's open to, it's definitely a global initiative. The UK is not unique. It's across the whole globe.
Yeah.
And potentially in some areas of the world, of course, the percentage impact that people can have is probably higher, not lower. Where you've got embedded technologies that are very energy intensive and not so controllable to that degree, like I know brewing industry, for example, they tend to be more Western based. So it's those industries where the savings percentage probably is less that you can get, but still very worthwhile. So yes, definitely a global initiative, and we've tried links to Canada and Australia, and yes, as you say, people have been on the course. In a way, I guess we are focusing initially on the UK, in the same way that we're very much focusing on energy, but this whole initiative is actually much wider than energy. You know, it's environment, it's sustainability. You know, the people type behaviors are relating to health and safety and HR and production efficiency and all of these things. So if you've got the core skills and approach to energy right, it will naturally have co-benefits to improve other areas of a business. But we're starting with energy only because it's a big enough nut to try to crack in the first place.
One thing I like about the training is obviously you go through the 4 sessions of the training course. There's an exam at the end of it to make sure that you've achieved the level of learning and understanding. But it doesn't stop there. We meet on a quarterly basis, I think it is. We all get invited. We come on, we see other people's case studies be presented to us. We break off into breakout rooms and we share each other knowledge. I like the community that's been developed around it. I think that's really key and important to take this forward.
Yeah, that was always one of our objectives. And I've been so pleased with that, because I wasn't initially sure how well it would sort of be received. But you're right, we've had a lot of people from the courses continue to come to these are the EnCO academies, as we call them.
Yeah.
The only shame in some respects, not that we could do anything about it, is the COVID impact, because you know, these courses that we've been running online, we would normally have done them face to face. And when you think about behavior change as the subject matter, if there's one thing that should be done face to face, it's these courses that we've been doing. But we've been nonetheless very pleased with the outcome.
You can cover a lot more ground with a lot more people around the country doing these courses. I think doing it this way and engaging overseas as well. I've noticed that with the training and the work I've been doing in this field. You can definitely cover. It saves me from driving around as well, you know, because my carbon footprint's been reduced radically during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think we'll ever go back just to having face to face. No. Which is obviously also good for the planet anyway. But there's definitely a role for it, and one of the key elements that we've not really been able to cover in the course is around facilitation, because facilitation skills are actually vital when you're helping to deliver a behavior change program. You know, you need to enthuse people and make sure that Fred over here has a say, because he's usually very quiet. Yeah. And you know, it's much easier, and you have to have the skills to be able to do that. We do plan to try to do a face-to-face along the lines of facilitation, because it would otherwise have been a core part of the course.
So Jes, it's come to that time in the podcast where I'm now going to put you on the spot, and you're going to laugh at me because you're thinking, well, what haven't I been put on the spot already? But no. So Jes, is there anything that you can give back to our audience today regarding EnCO?
I can think of a couple of angles. So the one which I'll come back to is actually what we can all do right now without going on a course or anything of that nature. And the other one, which I'll start with, is about EnCO, inquire about EnCO, find out about it. You know, there's jobs to be had from this for people. It's really interesting. You know, you need some technical knowledge, but actually it's not just about the technical knowledge. But you need enough knowledge to be able to actually enthuse. So whether you're looking for a role in the energy field, or whether you're already in the energy field, but this is a bit that you're, you know, behavior change is a bit that you don't know enough about. So when you're talking to your customers, or if you're in a company, you're, there's more that you need to understand, then please approach EnCO, and you know, there's it's all free. There's free. You know, a lot of it's not just John Mulholland and myself. We're the front end in as much as we're running the courses, but ourselves, James Britton, many other people have put a lot of time in for nothing. We're giving away our resources for nothing. We just want to save this planet such that we've still got grass, and we, you know, so and the planet's around for our descendants, which seems an entirely reasonable thing to me. I suppose it's also, Paul, when you're of our age, you get to that point. So really, please approach EnCO, find out about it. The second thing I said is come back to is what people can actually do right now. There's so much that people can do. Can you actually set yourself targets at your home or your work for reducing your base load, for example? Do you know what your base load is? You know, if you haven't got a smart meter, get one, because was never originally hugely behind smart meters, because there's a cost, and you think, well, what are you going to get for that? But actually, until you measure it, you've no idea where you're actually losing it. Once you've got that, what are your base loads? Then play around with your consumption at home. You know, I've been amazed recently that my supposed very 21st century Nest control system, which controls the whole house, has actually started turning itself on at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I can't actually work out how to stop it within the control system. This is a fairly recent problem. I will get to the end of the problem. And so I was finding that my base load was 3 times what it used to be. So actually, I go through a routine every night now of turning my whole boiler off, and complete with my control system, which sounds very bizarre, but until I get to the bottom of the problem. But if I hadn't measured it or seen the measurements, I wouldn't have known that. You can tweak around with other things that you can turn off. What's your fridge load doing? You know, what your phone system, your alarm system, your mobile phones. Does everyone turn their server off at night? There's no reason why you shouldn't. In fact, it's better that you turn your server off at night, because it makes the server last longer. It makes your computer run faster when you do start it up. So there isn't, and it saves energy. There is no reason anyone that leaves on a server or a mobile phone for the 8 hours of the night times 8 billion people on the planet is huge. So if you know, little simple things like, do you only put in the right amount of water into your kettle? We did a calculation that if everybody this is just the UK, if everybody just in the UK only boiled the amount of water that they required, we could actually shut down 2 power stations in the UK.
Amazing.
So why
and
aren't we doing these very simple things?
I can see where the multiplier comes from, and that's what it is, isn't it? It's you just multiplying the problem many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's far too many things that are creating a load, and we're getting far too, this is a personal thing, not an EnCO thing, but we're getting far too reliant on the mobile phone and just taking it for granted without, it's got huge benefits, don't get me wrong, but it's a bigger problem it's a bigger problem than air travel.
Yeah.
And what you hear people complaining about is air travel. Well, mobile phones and servers and so on, and that's just in data centers. That's not people's servers at home. Is the same size as aircraft. We're now going towards 5G, and 5G will consume a multiplier, a large multiplier on what we currently do. So yes, so some of this awareness is what we need to kind of get around, really.
And that's all it takes, really, is for that awareness. If people know that's the impact on it, then they might start thinking about that. And at this time, even if that 10% of those people only fill their kettle up to that level, it's a starting point, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And I think the other thing that I'd leave as a sort of, as I say, I'm not a tree hugger. I don't want to scare people, but people perhaps should start to think, how will they be viewed by their grandchildren in 50 years' time? How will they view what we actually do? In that, you know, we've used 50% of the world's resource within the last 100 years, roughly, of all different types of resource. What we're going to do? Keep doing that, and in 500 years we'll be like the Wombles of Wimbledon.
Yeah.
In an unfunny way.
And who will they be looking back at?
Who will they be looking back on?
Yeah.
Where did the problem go wrong? And I want to put my head above the parapet, and I don't want to be one of the multitude. No. I don't suppose it'll be differentiated, so I'll probably be blamed as well. But hey, what's new?
Yes, it's been really great catching up with you, and I know the great work you've been doing, and I've seen all the dedication because I've witnessed it and been on those courses, and you and John are doing an amazing job. And I know it's a team of you, but you know, you need to take a big pat on your back for the work you're doing within that group. I'd like to personally thank you for that as well. So it's been really good.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming along today. And please, you and your family, be safe in these times.
And you, Paul, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.